The Manitowish Waters Historical Society is pleased to present Jeanette Smith Davis sharing the Smith family interview. This interview was conducted on the Smiths' property on Manitowish Lake on June 6, 2023. Cap Smith hailed from Illinois, but loved the Northwoods and was one of the more poignant visitors who became residents in the Northwoods. He prized the fishing, the outdoor adventure, and creating a Northwoods hideaway for his family. If you look at the map below, you can see the Smith property on the west side of Manitowish Lake on the northern shore. Cap Smith had a sense of humor. Here he gives us great evidence in a comic way of the rocks in Stone Lake where that lake gets its name. The water is much lower in the teens when Cap Smith was here, and you can see the 2 points of rocks that are sticking up in the middle of Stone Lake. Today, we really don't know exactly where those rocks were, so that might be an adventure for somebody on the chain to take upon themselves and discover the answer to the mystery. Wilderness tripping was important to Cap Smith. As much as he loved being on Manitowish Lake, he loved getting into his canoes and going downstream or jumping into another river system. You see pictures of Cap Smith on the Flambeau River making camp, and on the lower left, he is entering into what becomes the Turtle Flambeau flowage when it was flooded in 1926. Images like abundant wild rice are all part of the collection of Cap Smith, which is in the Manitowish Waters Historical Society's Past Perfect collections. Be sure to take a look. And the Smiths' white cottages on Manitowish Lake still can be seen as you head up toward the channel to Little Star Lake. We hope you enjoy the interview with Jeanette Smith Davis.
Today is June 6, 2023, and would you state your full name?
My name is Jeanette Hester Smith Davis.
Okay. And I'm Kay Crayons, and Jim Bokern and Barbara Bartling are here to gain as much history about your family as we can so that we can preserve it, because it was such an important family in the Northwoods. Can you give your date of birth?
June 12th, 1935.
1935. And where were you born?
In Niles Center, Illinois, which is now called Skokie.
Okay. And can you name your family members?
My parents were Gordon, who was Charles and Olive's oldest son. My mother was Hester Best Smith from Ashland, Wisconsin. My brother, older by 3 years, is Gordon Diamond Smith Jr. And my sister, who is 5 years younger than I am, is Barbara Elizabeth Smith Stoner. And she's 85 years old now.
Okay.
Yeah,
And you have
83.
children. Could you name your children?
My children are Thomas Wellington Davis, Tammy Elizabeth Davis, deceased, my daughter Pamela Christine Davis, and my younger son Eric Osborne Davis. Thomas was born in 57, Tammy was born in 59, Pamela was born in 62, and Eric was born in 64, up here in Woodruff, Wisconsin.
Was that planned?
Yes.
Well, tell us about that, deciding to have a baby in the Northwoods.
Some iced tea?
Thank you. Yes, then.
Would you
My husband's mother was very ill. We lived in the Chicago area for a while then. His mother was down in Missouri. So every weekend he wanted to go down and be with her, and I wanted him to be with her. So I wrote my grandfather, who was up here, and said, find me a doctor to come see because I'm going to have a baby up there. We found a doctor, Dr. Hyatt, I believe his name was, down in Woodruff. I came up to see Dr. Hyatt in June, and I told him I'd be back in July because the baby was due in August. So I went back home, brought my family up here when my father arrived. My father was here, my mother would come later in July. And so Daddy and my other 3 children and I came up here for the rest of the summer. On August 27th at about 9 p.m., my dad drove me down to Woodruff. Back then, doctors in this area planned to induce babies because it was such distances to drive. So there was one other lady from Lac de Flambeau and me who arrived at about 10 o'clock at night, and Eric was born shortly after about 1 a.m. in the morning on the 28th. That was an exciting time because my father had never been with my mother when in the same room with her when we children were born, because that wasn't done. He was in the living room, she was in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to our amazement, I was a boy for the first 2 hours. You didn't know that was possible, did you? Anyway, the nurse was not too bright a nurse because she came out to the living room and told them my dad, he had a lovely second son. My dad said, well, how nice. His name is Thomas Wellington then. So for 2 hours I was Thomas Wellington. Then the doctor arrived. He went in to check my mom and me, and he came back out and told my dad, you've got a daughter. So I'm a daughter now. So my name became Jeanette Hester. Okay, where am I?
That's a great story.
My dad, after they took the baby from me and over to clean up and so forth, he came and looked in the windows to see me in the delivery room, which was all something exciting to him. He felt sorry for me. So he walks into the delivery room to make sure that I became comfortable by releasing me from where I was. And so he was standing there next to me, holding my hand and his arms around me when the nurses came back in to check on me. And there he was, hugging me and everything else. Okay, that's the story with my dad. Then the next day, my grandfather, great-grandpa, Charles, comes down to see me. He never does anything up just right. He does it up special. He had his top hat on. He had his cane with him. And then he danced and jigged all around the place to make sure that everybody knew that his great-grandson had been born.
Oh.
So this is the story of my crazy family. We're always doing crazy things.
But how wonderful. It sounds awesome.
It's just a big family with lots of love. Okay, that wasn't where I was going to start, but you did.
I think it was wonderful. So Cap Smith put on his top hat to come see his
Yes.
great-granddaughter.
Yes.
Or granddaughter.
Granddaughter have
Yeah.
great-grandson.
And great-grandson. What type of work did well, let's start with your Cap Smith. What type of work did he do?
He was what we call a lumbersmith, amongst many other things. He went out west to Washington to find lumber to bring back. He had a lumber company down in Chicago. It eventually became my uncle Herbert's, who was, how to say this, my grandma Smith was a smith before she was married. She had like 5 brothers. So all of my uncles on both sides are smiths everywhere. And Uncle Herb and Uncle Jack were just a few years, maybe 8 to 10, older than my dad. And they moved in with the family. So they lived with them and they were very close. So Uncle Herb and Aunt Mert eventually ended up in cabin number 4 for the most of the summers, all the time. Anyway, he took over the lumber company when Grandpa gave it up.
Okay.
And I can't tell you when that was. I have no idea exactly, but Grandpa did a
So he
lot.
traveled across the country to buy lumber,
Yes,
to have it sent
yes,
to Chicago
yes,
to
yes.
his lumber company. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting job.
Yes. And he was on the second train, or the first train after the great big one that was inundated, I think, by a big snowstorm out west in Washington. And for some reason, he was delayed on the one that went down, and a lot of people were killed on it. We've got some newspaper articles all over the place. I can give some of those to Barbara to copy and so forth. But it's a fascinating story. I can't remember, about 80 people were killed because the train just went over from the snowstorm. And he wasn't on that train. He
But
was
he was
on the next
supposed to
one.
be.
So he helped a lot of the people that were on the train that were still alive, and he helped get those out and so on.
Wow, that does sound like a good story.
Yes, it is.
So what about your dad? What was his profession? Now your dad is Gordon, correct?
Yes. Well, during the Depression, he worked as a for Marshall Fields and Company in their delivery room or something like that during the daytime, and then he went to college at night in Chicago, and then he started working for Curtis Candy Company, the makers of Baby Ruth
Yes.
and Butterfinger. Are you familiar with them? Or
I
no?
am.
Okay, well, he worked for them for 35 years, I think, till he retired. And they retired to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So,
But did they still come here in the summer?
oh, absolutely.
This was-
Every summer they drove all the way up here. I mean, they came up during the rest of the time they lived in Chicago too, but no.
Can you tell me, like, what this place meant to all the generations? So you start out with your grandfather,
Yeah.
Cap Smith, and what did he feel about the Northwoods?
Oh, the whole family just loved it. That's why I said we didn't rent to anybody else, because it was all family. We did have a lot of friends that would come up, and they would stay for a week or something like that, and then they'd go, and then we'd have another group of friends moon in. But no, the whole family was very active in it. I would say the least active was probably Ken, the youngest, just because he was doing other things. He was in the oil field, and I mean the oil business, and he was out exploring and so forth, and doing in Texas and in Colorado and in Utah and so forth. So he wasn't around that much.
So how many children did Cap and Olive have?
They had 7, but only 4 lived. So, and that's all listed in those books and so forth.
Okay, so name those 4 that were active in the
Okay, my father was first, Gordon. His sister he was born in Oh, 04, I think. Sis was born in, Jeanette was in 06. Then Bud, which was Charles Jr., was born maybe 8 years later, and then Ken was quite a while after that.
Okay.
But there were 2 little boys and 1 little girl that were lost.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So what brought Cap Smith here? He decided to come north, or did it have to do with his lumber business?
I have no idea their original thing, unless he came up just to go fishing or something. At first, maybe that's what that Kamkaki was. I don't know if that was his, or if he just went to a Kamkaki. But there are several older pictures of his, of the book that I have, that are in it. And,
That show him at Kamkaki?
yes, you could see the sign in the background, Kamkaki. And I'm presuming that the pictures that are in this same album might be from that too. But they took canoe trips from here all the way to Park Falls and so forth.
Now, was Olive as interested in the Northwoods as Cap?
I think she was after a while. When he came back from Washington, he was telling her how beautiful it was out there, and the trees and so forth, the volume. Have you ever been west?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the trees out there are huge because they get so much rain, and doesn't freeze and so forth. So he came back just gloating over, oh, Olive, we've got to move, we've got to go out there. She said, I'm not going anywhere. She wanted to stay here. So I don't know whether it was because most of the family was here, but those kids weren't even married by then. So yeah, I think it was the family, and she loved it.
And then Gordon and your mother
Yes.
married, and did you as a family spend your summers here?
Every summer. I can tell you about them. Unbelievably, yes. In in the Chicago area, we went to school till the last Friday in June. The car was packed that day. Daddy would buy roast beef sandwiches at the cafeteria where he worked, and that they went in the car. We jumped in the car and we drove up here. We didn't go back till Labor Day. However, he had to go home to work. And I can tell you later on about the way the men used to drive up. Every Friday night they'd leave work. They'd come up here to be with their families. We'd all stay up till 2 in the morning when they finally arrived. We'd all have, or they with the seniors, the adults, they'd have coffee and rolls and all kinds of things. Then they'd go to bed. And tradition was Saturday morning you got up and you went to the beach in your bathing suit at 6 in the morning. If not, if you didn't arrive by 7, we would go sing under your bedroom window and make sure. But everybody would sing good morning to you, and so forth down at the beach. And we'd end up with 20 people down there having coffee and rolls and juice and so forth and so on. And that was every Saturday morning. So it was just, and then after they got tired of driving and the trains started, they started coming up here more often after the war years. They would ride sometimes the Northwestern, the Sioux. It would depend on which one was running, which men were leaving, I should say, who was closest to which station that they would leave from down in Chicago. And then the third option, of course, was to go to Minocqua on the Milwaukee Road. So depending on which station, we always would go meet it even at 5 in the morning, and we would dress up like crazy people in all kinds of outfits and all kinds of hats and just being silly. And my cousin would play her accordion, and we'd all sing as they would get off the train, "Good morning to you," and they would, the poor men were all dressed up in their suits and all, you know, embarrassed as all heck, but they loved it.
Yeah.
So
So, your dad and his siblings had cottages that were just
sometimes it was siblings, sometimes it was the uncles.
okay.
Sometimes it would be the friend that was coming or had stayed for 2 weeks, the husband would be. So it would be Uncle Herb for sure, and my dad, and maybe Uncle Bud, maybe Uncle Carl, who was in my mother's side of the family. Maybe it would be Cy. Maybe it would be Bud. You just never.
So you had lots of cousins as playmates.
Yes, yes.
So
Yeah.
that must have been exciting. huh?
However, Gordy and I were the two oldest
Oh.
of all the grandchildren. And Gordy was the only boy out of the 7 that came here. So he was the shining star of the family. As much as I loved him, he was always the shining star.
So what did you do as children here when you all got together after you were at the beach and having your rolls and juice? What happened next?
We just continued swimming all day, in and out of the water. We'd go upstairs to the cabins, make our sandwiches, go down to the beach and eat lunch. Sometimes we'd have organized things like the bag races and water, and you don't spill it and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes we had, what do you call them? Treasure hunts?
Oh,
Wasn't that
okay.
it?
yeah.
That you, and something, they'd give you clues, and we'd have teams and so forth, maybe 6 or 8 on a team, and we'd have different age groups, so you'd have a couple adults and then 4 kids or something, you know, and we'd run all over the.
So you guys were kind of on your own all day, the kids. And then what did your mothers do while you were out playing?
They would play with us.
Good.
Oh, heavens, yes. Mom and my mother was a fish as far as water was concerned. She just loved it.
Mm-hmm.
My dad wasn't. That was funny. And my son Tom isn't. But, I mean, they love it up here, but they're not swimmers. I should tell you the story Tom told me. I asked him, I said, what are some of your memorable, you know, experiences up here? And Tom said, well, one of them was a miserable one. And I said, well, what happened? I can't imagine that. Well, we had one second cousin, I guess you'd call her, who was pretty much raised in Hawaii. So she swam all year round. Well, we only swam up here. We never went to parks at home and went to pools. So great-grandpa Charles noticed that the little girl was down here swimming like crazy, and Tommy wasn't. So all of a sudden, Tom discovers Grandpa comes down with a pole and a rope and a loop on it. And he told Tommy, get in that loop. You're going to learn how to swim. And he said I had to swim up and down in front of all the relatives. And he said, I finally learned how to swim. But that was very humiliating and very upsetting to him as a little kid.
Yeah.
But he learned. One of Grandpa's big rules was you didn't get to go out in a boat by yourself unless you could swim across the lake.
Right across here, this narrows here?
From
Yeah.
here, there was a dead tree over on the other side, and I guess it's still there, but you can't see it very well now. But when we were kids, it stood out. So the first thing you ever did before you went in a canoe or in a boat was swim across the lake. We were always accompanied by one boat with it, one rowing, to make sure that if you needed to get out, you had the source to do that. So if you could prove to Grandpa you could do that, then you could go wherever you wanted. Sailboat, motor, no, we didn't have motors back then. But
So, what was it like? So the kids are playing and they're swimming, and when they're old enough, they're boating. What was it like in the evening when you came in for supper? Did the whole compound get together, or were you all in your own little cabins?
on Saturdays, we did get together, yes. I mean, that was when the fathers were here and the whole families were together. We always had another beach party down there. I mean, we beached all the time. Yes, we had potluck dinners. I mean, that was back in the days before you grilled. Mm-hmm. We did do the s'mores afterwards. Then after that, why my one cousin or my grandfather would play the accordion. We would sing songs like crazy. And then I have to tell you about something else we did. Let's see. Oh, that's it. Oh, yes. I had all these in sequence, and you asked me questions that I... Okay, here it is. Family traditions stayed pretty much the same from summer to summer. I was talking about the fathers driving up and so forth, the big potluck dinners, the fires and s'mores, and to top the evening. And then we danced what we called Ak Ya. This was, you went in a circle in pairs, usually a boy and a girl, okay? Then you sang this song. My mother and my father go to church Sunday. Ak Ya, Ak Ya. They haven't any money, but to everyone they say, Ak Ya, Ak Ya. Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la. Ak Ya, Ak Ya. Then the boys moved forward. They were all on the outside. So you changed partners every time. And that's what we sang. And we danced right down on the beach. And that was Saturday night tradition. So after the s'mores, to wear
really
off
fun.
the s'mores.
So you had family friends come up. Were there any romances as you got older?
I can't think of any. I did have boyfriends come up at various times. And the last one was my husband. But he came up as a younger gentleman, of course. He had been in the Marine Corps in the Korean War for 4 years. So he had a lot in common with my grandpa. My dad and most of my uncles were not in the service because they were just at that age that were above it, and they had families and so forth, so they didn't go. Mm-hmm. But Grandpa and my husband Tom got along. Well, the one time I brought him up, or the first time I brought him up, Grandpa always said, everybody congregated when the men were ready to drive and leave and go back, and that was one of the times Tom rode with my dad and some of the other men. And Grandpa stood up on that back porch, and he put his arms like this, and he looked at Tom and he said, "Don't you ever come back here again, unless you call me Grandpa." Well, boy, was I relieved. Whew! Because that was the guy that I really think I was pretty close to, you know.
Yeah.
We were both in college. The other boyfriends were high school, and you know. But that scared the heck out of me for about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Grandpa and he were good pals.
So did you get to be friends with, did your family get to be friends with other people in the Northwoods? Who were the special people that you all knew?
Well, you know, that's a very good question. My dad did. I mean, my grandpa did for sure. My dad did after they retired to Albuquerque because he could have enough time to do something. You know, when he would come up just on the weekends or even with a week, he was the kind that never wanted to leave the place.
Yeah.
But once they retired in 59, and he didn't pass on till 72. My grandfather passed on in January of 72, and my dad passed on July 1st, about it's the same year. So it was a very, very big loss for the family. So my dad played the piano in a trio that was up here. Now, do you, being an old timer from around here, did you know the sisters that ran the post office
Yes.
in Manitowish?
The Andrews sisters.
Andrews.
Yes.
I was right. I do have. I wrote
Phyllis
it down.
and
It was oh gosh, what were their names?
Phyllis and Geraldine.
Phyllis, I had right. I had Audrey. It was Geraldine.
Yeah.
Okay, the two of them, I remember them. One of them, they both lived down here on Manitowish Lake, down on the larger bay down there.
Phyllis had property here.
Yes, yeah. They both lived in a house down there, and that was where all the pike fishermen went out in that bay every night. Okay, I think, is she the one in the center there? And that lady that's playing the violin, she lived in Manitowish.
She is Anna Mae Laporte.
Oh yes, okay. I couldn't put a name with her.
And I think the piano player is that Jerry or is that Phyllis?
No, the piano player is my dad.
Well, I see the man, but there's a woman sitting there too.
Well, that's the man that's sitting. Daddy played the piano. I think that she was just taking a break then.
And this is Voss's.
Yes.
Yeah.
They played at Voss's, both in the coffee shop for a while, and then they'd go across and just do it. What was it? A room right next to it was the bar.
Yeah.
And then they played at 3030 Lodge
Okay.
for a long time. So he was very active in those, in
So
playing.
that musical ability. Your Cap Smith was a musician,
Yeah.
and then your dad,
Yes, yes.
and he played both of them played the piano. What other accordions?
My dad didn't play the accordion.
Okay.
Just Grandpa and my one dear cousin that played, yeah.
Okay.
Uncle Jack's daughter, Elaine was her name.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, that's my dad. Would that happen to be one of the sisters?
I think it is.
Well,
I
that's
think
what
it
I
is an
thought, too.
Andrews.
Yeah, one of the Andrews sisters. Okay, I thought so, but I wasn't quite sure. But I think she's just sitting there holding the music because she played a different instrument. What would it have been? Because Daddy always played the piano. I can't remember.
We just did an article on musicians, and we missed Gordon. We should have had him in the article.
Yes, yeah, you should have.
And I can't think right now the other instrument, but it's in her.
Yeah, well, this says 1970. I don't know that when they retired in 59, if he was doing it quite that soon or not.
Okay.
But
So the family this was where they were tied. They wanted to be here on the property as much as possible.
yes, yeah.
But then when your dad retired, he enjoyed playing music with other musicians in the community.
And I think he also joined one of the men's clubs, but maybe I'm wrong. Either Kiwanis or Lions.
Probably Lions in Manitowish Waters, maybe.
Was it? Okay. I don't know, but I just know that he did.
Did
do
you,
that.
as children, get off the property? What would you do if you left the property? Where would you go, or as a group, or as individual families?
Well, we had grandparents that lived up in Ashland too, so we went up there. We traveled to Copper Falls several times. We went to Little Girls Point, which is where I think Tammy and her husband are going to go tomorrow, because she's never been there, or she remembers going there as a young baby. I don't think, we went down to Minocqua to go to the movies. I mean, whoopee-doo. You remember the man that used to be in the Iron Lung down there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So you'd see him at the movies?
Yes, yeah. The one in, I'm trying to remember if he ever was in the Woodruff one, if it was just down in the Minocqua one.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
And then you didn't go out to dinner often? Stayed here for dinners?
Yeah, pretty much so.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. Frankly, we couldn't afford much, really, when I think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time we traveled up here and so forth and so on, but we always, Daddy just preferred to.
Yeah. Be home. Especially if he's sitting in Chicago all week while you guys are up here.
Right. Uh-huh. So,
So this was a family compound. It looks like a resort, but it really is a family compound.
yes, very much so. Except before, probably up until when I was born, and I can't remember the year I'm sure it happened before the war, I think, that they sold to Hutters.
Okay.
But there was at one point a cabin between this one and the next one, and I can remember when they moved this one down to Hutters,
Okay.
and that the first one that was built on the place here was what they call the Brown Cottage that's down there. I don't know if it still is, but that was our first ice house back then, and then it was converted to a cabin. And I don't remember how many cabins they had down there.
At Hutters.
At Hutters. They didn't always look the same as these did. I don't know whether these were built first. I've heard this was built in 24, but I don't know.
Okay. So you have an ice house. You don't have electricity in the early days.
No, they didn't, and we didn't. The ice house that we had was built down here, the other side of where Scott's house is. And we had a caretaker, Mac McSweeney was his name, and they lived in what they call the farmhouse, which is shown in here, and it did have heat because stayed.
There's pictures over there.
Yeah, there's pictures of it, and they added a room to it, an extra one, and it had heat in the wintertime, and I don't know if it was just a wood stove or what. I don't really
But they
know.
stayed year-round
I think
on the
so.
property?
However, during the war years, Mac went down to Chicago to work in the ammunition plants or something. He was an engineer of some sort. And Mrs. Mac was his mom, and he had a sister that was what we used to call an invalid, but I'm sure it was from polio, and she was in a wheelchair. But Mrs. Mac would be here Saturday morning and Saturday night, and so we push her daughter Margaret down to the beach to enjoy with us. She's in several of those pictures that we have when we have picnics out here in the back and so forth. So
Do you know how many years the McSweeneys were your caretakers?
no, a long time though, because I was thinking he helped build the additions over here.
So pretty much of your growing up years they were
Oh
here.
yes, yeah, and he had the big old truck, and he would. There's pictures of him sitting on the edge of the truck with us kids. In fact, I think there's one up there on the wall. And he would go down every week and get the ice, and deliver the ice cubes, or whatever you call them.
Oh, the big blocks of ice, yeah.
Yeah, the blocks of ice. Yeah,
For the ice
for
boxes.
the ice boxes in all of the places. Yes,
Yeah.
he would deliver those. The laundry was done, at least when I was a child, by my mother mostly. We washed it down in the boathouse.
In the lake?
Well, we took the cold water in buckets into the washing machine.
Okay.
We washed it in there. Then we put it through the wringer. Then we took the sheets out and rinsed them in the lake. Then we put them back in the wringer to wring them out, and then we hang them up. And then Mother had to iron all the sheets, because you ironed sheets back then for all the people that rented from you. So that was my mother's work.
So at that time, some of the places were being rented.
Well, I said they were friends, though, of
But yeah,
families.
okay.
But still,
You had a lot of company.
you had a lot of company. Yes. And I was telling you earlier, and it was 1953, I'm sure, that the preacher lived here.
Oh, yes.
And
Tell
he
us
was
about
in the cottage number 5, and I can't remember his last name. His first name was Calvin. And he had 3 children, and they were a lovely family, and they fit in with everybody else. But my grandparents were some of those, along with the Ilges and the Perkins. And do the Perkins, are they any of those still around?
No.
They
There's
aren't.
a few
The
relatives
Perkins used to, she was the postmistress after,
Yeah.
what was his name? The one that,
Can't remember.
she ran the knit shop and he ran the post office.
Ted Daniels.
What?
Ted Daniels.
Ted Daniels.
Ted Daniels, that's right. And she played in the band, what do they call the kitchen band?
Yes.
Yes, we used to go to that. That was something we went to.
You-
How often did they play? Once a month?
Well, I've seen pictures of them on the 4th of July and in a
Yeah.
parade.
Oh yeah, but they used to perform over at the schoolhouse here, and we used to go to those at least 2 or 3 times a summer. I'm
That's
sure.
great. That's
Yeah.
great.
But
So Calvin's wife, do you remember her name?
no, I don't, and
Okay.
I don't remember their last name.
But they lived. So your grandfather is helping create the new church.
Yes, they did. And I
Great.
said it was the Ilges, I know, and the Perkins were some of them. I can't remember the Mitchells were in on that or not.
Did you know Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell?
I remember Mr. Mitchell, and it used to be a dairy farm over there. He had cows, and Grandpa used to take us fishing over there, my brother and I, Gordy and I. You know, when we went fishing here in Manitowish, we used to go around the corner in a bay, little bay, the first one beyond the swamp, and all we seemed to catch were perch out of this lake.
Mm-hmm.
So Grandpa said, well, it's time to go over to Mitchell's. So we go to Mr. Mitchell, and he would let us use one of his boats. And we always caught either bluegills or sunfish over there. Now, why? I don't know. But we all were so excited, the 2 of us, to go over there to Mr. Mitchell's.
So you remember Mr. Mitchell being a pretty elderly man by the time you...
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I think I've read, too, that he grew potatoes there as well.
Well, that could be.
Yeah.
But he did have a few cows. I mean, I called it a dairy farm, but anything to a city kid that had more than 2 or 3 cows was a dairy farm.
Yeah. Who are some of the other people you remember?
Oh, the Laportes. for
Well, tell
sure.
us about the Laportes.
Well, George was so huge.
Huge being
To a
tall.
little tall, yes,
Yeah.
yes. A big man. Big hands. I mean, because he was a big person.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And he pretty much, if I'm not mistaken, mostly took care of the bait on outside. Am I wrong? Am I right? Okay, yeah, I thought so. Because they had bait things outside.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only place to get bait.
Uh-huh.
As far as
The only place to get groceries just about, too.
Right,
at the
right,
time,
right. Well, that, yes, I
Yeah.
know that. And of course, we never bought bait because Grandpa had us out digging worms and you didn't fish unless you knew how to put a worm on a hook yourself. So Sissy learned really quickly. Yes. I know how to put a worm on real well.
So he had all these little grandchildren to send out to get the bait.
Yeah, right.
Pretty good deal.
Well, he might have done the digging. I don't know if I could have done that, but yeah. No, he was a great guy. He even took me muskie hunting or fishing with him, and then I scared the muskie away as he was hauling it in. They don't hook on that well sometimes, and he'd lose it because of me.
Oh.
Bless his heart. Then he wrote a poem about me.
Did he?
Oh, yes.
Do you have that with
Oh, yes,
for
it's
us?
over there.
Great.
Yeah, Sissy Says, I think it's called. I don't know.
What about your grandmother? Was she special in your life?
Yes, oh yes. Grandma taught me how to knit. I'm left-handed and Grandma was left-handed. And in second grade, they tried to change me.
Yeah.
And I would be darned if I was going to change because my grandma was left-handed and I wanted to be like my grandma. So she taught me how to knit. And we went to that yarn shop of Mrs. Daniels frequently. In fact, every woman on the place was over there knitting up a storm. I mean, we'd sit down at the beach and we'd go swimming and then we'd hop out and we'd dry
Do a
out and
little
then we'd
knit.
sit and knit and so forth. The first pair of Argyle socks, and that's what you started with. You didn't even knit regular socks. We knit Argyles.
That's a difficult.
Yes, yes. And this was the old yarn that was really thin, and you used only 1 or 2 needles in the numbers. And the first pair I ever made, I made the mistake of giving them to my grandpa. And Grandma was not very happy because he wore the socks I made him, but he wouldn't make the ones she made. And I just felt like this big because I was breaking her trust, but yet
It was pretty
Gaining
special that
his.
Grandpa liked yours. Yeah, and
So-
of course he would wear yours.
yes, he would. But anyway, she forgave me. But
So are the cottages pretty much the way they were when you were growing up? I mean, have you tried to keep the integrity of the...
yes, but there's one cottage between where the office is and the next little cottage is pictured up there, and I'm sure they have some in there they can get. It was called number 1, just because the one they made into the big house was number 2. This is number 3.
Mm-hmm.
My parents spent part of their honeymoon in that cottage in 1929. They left Ashland and went up to Canada. Can't think of the town up there, the city. Anyway, they went up to Canada for their honeymoon and then came back, and then they stayed the rest of their honeymoon and the rest of the summer in that place, as Daddy was running the place for them in 1929. My husband and I were married in 1955, and we didn't have any money because we were between our junior and senior year in college, and so we went out 2 nights, and then we stopped at his relatives in Beloit, and then we ended up in the honeymoon cottage up here, or the cabin, and we're up there and stayed. And dear Grandma came. There was a little porch out in front, a screen porch, that we were eating our lunch, and Grandma came over to visit with us just from outside, and she stood outside the screen door and chatted. And Grandpa came over. Don't disturb them. They're on their honeymoon. You shouldn't be here. So he took Grandma back.
That's
Oh.
really cute.
But yeah, it's after that it was always pretty much occupied by my dad's cousin Olive, who was named after Olive, my grandma. Or she lost her husband in World War II and had 2 children, and so the family really took care of her a lot, and she was up here and stayed in that cabin just about every summer that I can remember with her 2 little kids.
Oh,
So
yeah.
her daughter worked, well then they ended up moving up here when her husband passed on, the younger Susie's husband did. They bought the old Valhalla house, big old house. That used to be the monstrosity of the place for a long time. I mean, it
Now, the
stood
Valhalla house was where?
over on Star Lake. It's just down from, at least that's what they used to call it, from Bohemia,
Okay.
going towards town. It was a huge white house. I mean, now it's obscured by trees.
Oh, so that would have been Roy Jorgensen's home, maybe?
I can't remember the name of the
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
but that sounds like a
yeah.
Valhalla is a Scandinavian
Yeah,
name, I think, and
right.
Jorgensen makes sense.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
they had lived there, bought that place, and lived there. And her kids all went to school up here.
Oh.
And then Susie ended up being a hostess over at Voss's dining room, because I can remember seeing her a few years ago when we went over there.
What was Susie's last name?
Oh, Susie. Susie and Jim. Oh,
Maybe
that's
it'll come.
terrible.
It'll come to you, maybe.
Yeah. Her kids were Bob and, can't even remember the daughter's name. That's terrible. Okay.
Did the Great Depression affect your family?
The Depression? Well, heavens, yes. You know, that was the one summer that my grandmother and my brother and I came up here with her alone, the three of us. That was part of, I mean, it was into the 40s, but still the Depression was the Depression almost till World War II came, and then
Right.
the things picked up. Yes, that was an interesting time in our life. We arrived in Manitowish Waters, or Manitowish, on the train, on the Chicago Northwestern overnight. We were met by Mr. and Mrs. Olson, who drove a Model T. We proceeded from Manitowish to LaPorte's, where we got to stop and buy groceries.
Uh-huh.
Then we also, I think, bought ice there. We must have, or somewhere in town, because we didn't have any ice facility then, ice house. So he brought us over, dropped the three of us off, and he came back a week later so we could go back to LaPorte's, because that was the extent of our social life, except you played cribbage with Grandma at night.
Yeah, Jim. So,
So that there was 1 year or 1 week.
it's okay.
Everything's fine.
Okay.
There was
Sorry.
1 week that Mr. Olson couldn't make it. So Uncle Jack, my grandmother's one of her brothers, came up to visit for about 2 weeks, I think it was. So it was nice to have some company. I mean, we had no electricity, we had no heat.
Low disk space.
We had a little water pump in the kitchen sink,
Mm-hmm.
and that was about all we had, plus kerosene lamps. So Uncle Jack, my brother, and I sitting in the middle of the canoe, and the other two, they paddled all the way around to Rest Lake, where we went to LaPorte's, because Mr. Olson couldn't come that week.
So that was an adventure.
That was an adventure, yes. And we didn't buy any ice cream that week. I don't even know, we must have had milk, but I don't know. I don't even know if they carried ice cream back then, because they didn't have freezers, I don't think.
Did you make ice cream on the property when you had the ice house? Did you use ice for?
No, but we did lots of other times. We cranked it ourselves, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big event We still have one of the makers up there. Anyway, there was just the three of us here until Uncle Jack came. And Uncle Jack and Grandma were very competitive when it came to playing cribbage. Grandma played with us kids, but she was pretty much teaching us how. And so, we learned from her. But the two of them, we kept track of who won and who lost and everything else because they were very fun and competitive. And it was so much fun to have them. And the pictures that are over there that are of that time, I gave them to Barbara, that Uncle Jack is the one that took those.
Okay.
Because I didn't have a camera then and so forth. So,
Do you ever remember hearing about any bootlegging or gangsters in the area?
well, yes, I mean, it was before my time really when the what's his name, Dillinger thing was going on. We had heard that some of them ran down this way. I mean, I know they went north in the car and so forth, but I think there was supposed to be some running down.
Babyface Nelson probably came right across
Yeah.
your shore because
Yeah.
he was on his way to Paul Lang's
Yeah.
resort.
So some of those those were the ones that lived down in the bay right down here too.
And
near the
he was a
Andrews.
music. Both of them were musicians. So your father would have probably played with them.
Okay, it was one of the Langs. That was the name that I forgot. Would
Paul
that have
Lang
been-
was a violinist,
okay.
a good classical violinist.
Okay, but you said the other one was a
Laporte.
A Laporte.
Anna Mae
okay.
Laporte. And
Anna
she
Mae.
was classically trained on the violin
Yes,
as well.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, Daddy so much enjoyed that. So, yeah, we had heard tales about it, but, they sounded so much like tales to kids that, you didn't know whether to believe it or not. So,
How about bootlegging? Did you ever hear of any bootleg whiskey or anything?
no, but I'm sure if my grandfather was in on it, I wouldn't have been told.
Yes. Right.
So it wouldn't surprise me, though. He liked a drink once in a while. I'm sure.
I found a newspaper article, and it was the cutest newspaper article. I need to find it to give to you, but it was about Cap Smith, and everybody was worried that he was going a little crazy because he was driving down Highway 10, 51, throwing $100 bills out of the car.
I've never heard that.
And it turns out they were a foreign currency, but everybody was panicking because
That sounds like him. That sounds like one of his tricks, his jokes. Yes. Yeah, I have quite a few foreign currency things that he gave me and so forth. So yeah.
yeah. But that must have been one of his jokes,
That
and everybody's
could be,
going, "What's
right.
wrong with Cap Smith?"
One of the things that after he came back, Gordy and I got to fish with him, but being the two eldest, we also were given the jobs. We got to varnish the old birch bark canoe.
Oh.
He had an old birch bark canoe, so we got to do that. The old one wooden one that said El Capitan on it, that was red. We got to paint that one and then put a clear coat of something over it and so forth. We rented out or gave rowboats to each of the cottages. They needed to be painted because those were old wooden ones. So we painted all of them green. So we got to do all these fun things, which didn't bother us. I mean, it was part of coming up and being with Grandma and Grandpa,
Right.
But
I used to remember cleaning wooden boats
Yeah,
and
yeah.
getting them all polished up for the summer and being really
you
proud.
had to scrape them first
Yeah.
and then paint them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Do you still have El Capitan and the birch bark canoe?
no, no. Mm-mm. I think they probably disintegrated. I don't know.
Right. Right.
I don't know. So, yeah, when just going through my things here, Mrs. McSweeney, we always just called her Mrs. Mac, when she came for one of these, either breakfast or the dinner thing, she brought her famous, what we called donut hole size goodies. They had apple inserts in them, and she called them Oli Kookens. Now, that doesn't sound Irish to me at all.
No,
Oli Kuchen.
Kuchen is German. I would
Yes,
think.
I know it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Are they good, huh?
Oh, they were yummy.
Homemade.
They were about this big, and she'd bring, a bowl full of them, and they were gone within a short time, especially when she brought them for the breakfast time.
Now there's an apple. What you're describing sounds like Abelskiver, which is Danish, but apple Kuchen, Abelskiver. I don't know.
But she was one that did that. So, okay, let's see what else. Yeah, the big house over there, Grandpa did have a single washstand and a toilet finally put in over there, because we all had outhouses up and down the place here, but he had one of those. So, and every Saturday night after we got through with all the goings on down here, they would form at least 2 and usually 3 bridge tables up in the big living room, and they played bridge till almost midnight. And then we'd get the coffee pot out, and everything was going on again. But lots and lots of bridge playing.
It sounds
every
like
weekend.
every part of the generations that were here just had. It was like being on vacation in a resort, but it was all your family. It was very cool.
Yeah, and all lots of friends though too. I
Yep.
mean, lots of them until the last. That was my teenage years when it was really busy with all kinds of families. Then, as I said, Herb and Mert were in number 4, the one next to this one, and then my Uncle Jack and Aunt Florence. They had owned a place down in Illinois on Lake Zurich, and they loved the place, but the water down there was not clear like this. It was muddy. So my family, when we went to see them, we were, yuck, and so forth. Well, they finally came up here. His wife really liked it down there, but when she came up here with her kids and experienced the clear water, I think that's when they finally gave up the place down there and decided to come here. And he had switched the cabin around so that the kitchen was in front, so she could look out the window
Watch
and
the
see
kids.
the lake and so forth, and not be like here, it's in the back. And he put in a toilet and a wash basin, and in the middle bedroom, and then he built, what do you call it when you have beds for kids?
Oh, bunk beds.
Bunk beds. He built bunk beds in there for his grandkids. And so he had totally redone it. And Grandpa said, go ahead, you do with it what you like, and so forth. And he passed on relatively young, but his wife and family and her kids and their kids and so forth continued using it for a long time.
Now you say that Cap was involved in the beginnings of the Presbyterian Church. Did you go to the Presbyterian Church on Sundays?
Well, with him up here, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
What are your memories about that?
Well, they were great because the guy I was pretty much going with was one of the Perkins, and they were part of the church.
Good excuse, huh? Because
Yeah,
of your
yeah.
boyfriend.
Yeah, so we had a good time. We went out partying after midnight when I get off of work, depending on that. So
Tell us about your work days at Kerner's.
Oh, well, there's pictures over there too. I had a ball working at Kerner's. I really did.
And you tell us about
Well,
who were the owners at the time you
well,
worked
the
there?
Kerners.
But I mean, which
Oh, Alvin
Alvin.
and his wife. I can't remember her name. She pretty much ran the dining room, and he ran the bar.
Okay.
And the bar was. Do you remember what it was like? The bar was on this side, and the coffee shop on this
Yep.
side. So he would go back and forth all the time.
Uh-huh.
And I mostly was the cashier and the hostess. But if the cook was off for the day or was sick or something, I was back in the kitchen. If one or two of the waitresses couldn't make it or there was something happening, I was a waitress, but I was the catch-all.
And how old were you at the time you
Well,
were?
let's see. I got married at 20. I would have been 18 and 19 the
Okay.
2 summers I was here. So,
Did a lot of summer kids come into Kerner's at that time? Summer teenagers or local teenagers?
oh, no, because most of them had jobs too. I mean, I didn't see them till midnight after we all got off work.
So you had a force of teenagers who got together.
I knew Jim Laporte.
Jim?
Let's put, he was one, and Susie Voss.
Mm-hmm.
They were the only two that I really knew locally.
Uh-huh. And then this boyfriend.
Yeah, Perkins, yeah. And Perkins had a younger brother that used to come once in a while.
What was Perkins' first name?
Jim.
Jim Perkins. Okay.
He went to the university at Superior.
Okay.
That's where he went to school. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And he was quite a musician and so forth too, if I'm
Was
not
he?
mistaken. I think that's what he was majoring in, and he eventually became a music instructor in a high school. That's what he planned to do. So.
So what was it like to work for Kerner's, and how was it fun to work in the...
Oh yeah, it was fun. And my crazy family, as I said, they do all kinds of crazy things. They used to hike down there. The old road used to be just right next to 51, and it was still a pathway in there, more or less.
Uh-huh.
And they would hike down there sometimes, or they would canoe down. But they never left home until 10 o'clock or so, because they knew we closed at midnight, so they'd come in at 11 o'clock or even 11:30, bless their hearts. And then after they would wait tables, or we would wait tables on them and so forth, because there were so many, and they'd bring 3 or 4 canoes down. And you'd have 16 people walk in on you to get everything cleaned up. They always put their tip, like a dime or a quarter, underneath every glass on the on the table, trying to be silly.
You had to check every dish.
Yeah, you had to make sure you checked every dish before you put it in the dishwasher.
Now, when you said at midnight you get together with the young people in the area, what did you guys do? Where did you go, and what did you do?
We went to Star Lake Beach,
Star Lake
and
Beach.
it wasn't anything then. I mean, I've got a couple pictures of it when my brother and I went there, and it's still all stumps and stuff like this
Oh,
and so on. Yeah, that's where.
that's where you'd meet up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And your parents knew you were out there.
My mom did. Well, I didn't do it on the weekends
Yeah,
because I was
your
here
dad
with
was
the
up, yeah.
family.
She was okay.
I'm not saying I went every night, and I said it was the first year I was free.
That's right. Because next,
But I've got to tell you, well, anyway, I enjoyed going over to see Clara, working in the dining room. She was the hostess.
Clara, do you know her last name?
Basil's wife.
Oh, Clara de
Yeah.
Pateau. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was such a sweetheart. She also played, it was either the piano or the organ in the church.
In
little-
the Presbyterian church or the Catholic?
The Presbyterian one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they both went to church there with us.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd see Basil on Sunday. Sometimes if he wasn't guiding, you know.
He was a pretty famous guide, I understand.
Oh, yes. And he'd go by here with somebody, you know, going to guide them over to Star Lake, and he'd wave to us if we were down at the beach, or us kids and so forth. And once in a while, on the way back or something, if they were somebody that lived over there or came from over there, stayed at Bohemia, they'd get off there and then he'd stop by and chat with us and so forth. So, no, we loved him. Yeah,
So he liked children.
yeah, and he stopped by at the coffee shop once in a while when he was there. So yeah, he was Quote's family too, so to speak.
Very nice.
Yeah.
He was, I believe he was from Modena originally.
Yes, he was. And of course, Mom was from Ashland, so she used to laugh and say, "Oh, I knew him back then too." But
And Clara, I don't know where Clara was from.
I don't know.
Did
that
they have
either.
children?
No, I know not that I know
I
of.
didn't think so.
No. Mm-mm. And I found the nicest letter or card. My grandmother passed on long before my grandfather did. And Clara and Basil both wrote a nice little note to him on a card when she passed
So they were
on.
good friends.
Yeah, I mean, good enough to do something like that
Yeah.
because the service was down. Well, she passed on in Albuquerque,
Oh, sorry.
and well, it was back in '59, you know. But then they brought her back to Chicago to have the service. So,
Do you remember any other guides besides Basil and?
No.
You don't. He was
No.
primarily the person you knew as a famous guide. Did you ever say, "Oh, gee, Mom and Dad, I don't want to spend the summer up there. I want to be in Chicago with my friends"?
oh hell no! Excuse me, no, I would never have stayed there. We did take 3 trips. My mother insisted that we go on some trips to explore the country. So we went out to the Rockies and went up through Yellowstone and all of that. There's the Black Hills and so on the way home. And ended up here at the lake probably the middle of July. I'm just guessing 2 weeks on the trip and so forth. Then 1 week we went to Cape Cod and 1 week we went up to Maine. One summer. So Mom just felt we needed to see part of the country besides just the lake. And she said, "I love it up there and we all do, but we need to see something else."
Yeah.
So we did do those things. But other than that, no. You know, after you've been swimming in a freshwater lake,
That's
a
nothing
pool
like it.
is
Yeah.
doesn't invite you in any way, shape, or form. And my friends all said, "Oh, we went to the pool yesterday. Oh, we're going to the pool next week." And I thought,
Poor people.
and I
huh?
never went to camp either. And people enjoyed camp. And I know it's a great place for people that,
But you were at camp right here.
that's right. I didn't have it in instructions or anything else, except for Grandpa.
He probably was a great camp director.
Yes, oh yes, that he was. So, but yeah, we had a good time.
How about wild animals around the place?
Oh yeah, the deer were crazy, and we used to go over to the dump to see the bears, like everybody else. Yeah.
It was a big excursion, wasn't it?
And
Did you ever try to tame a deer here, or
Did we what?
did you ever have any pet wild animals? Did you ever try to tame any of the
I
animals?
had tame chipmunks, if you want to call them taming. I'd have them come and crawl on me, or I'd have a milk bottle on my lap and have peanuts in it, and they'd crawl inside the peanuts and back and forth and around and so on.
I bet that was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And we would sit over on the front porch over there, and yeah, but that was all. We didn't have anything else. We loved having the deer around and the what else? Not much else. We have I don't know if it goes farther away or further from here, but there's an albino and her baby and her fawn that's here.
Is she white to the fawn?
Yes, yes, the
Oh,
fawn
that's
is white
exciting.
too. I haven't seen it, but my son saw it, and Scott and Jane had sent pictures of it. So it's the doe and the fawn.
Very
and what
nice.
was it? A couple years ago they had a buck, but somebody ended up shooting it, or maybe over the winter. I don't
Yeah.
know. Or
That's a
during
bad
hunting
mistake.
season. Pardon?
That's a bad mistake. It's hard to believe that would happen.
Yes.
Let's see what else I wanted to ask you. Did Cap, was he a hunter?
Yes, yes, yes. Because he brought, he would hang the deer up out here, and he brought venison down several times for our Christmas dinner. Yeah.
And you'd have venison for Christmas.
Yes, we
How
have.
about your dad? Was he a hunter as well?
No, my dad, I don't think he even knew how to pull shoot a gun. But my
So-
husband was.
Did they come? They come up here for deer season? The men from Chicago, your family?
No,
No.
my grandpa was the only one, and I can't remember if he shot the bear that they had up there in the tree, or if he just knew there was one. But my grandparents used to stay here after they had a furnace put in over there and so forth. They would stay till Christmas time, and then they'd come down and be down with us for a week or two, and then they'd come back up again. So they did become permanent ones. But as my kids said, what did they do with all those animals that they had? You know, the milk cow, the chickens. I mean, the chickens, you could easily probably consume or give them away or something. I have a question to ask some of you. Did either of you know, what is it? I have it over there. Thea and George Fisher. I think they ran the mink farm. Do you remember a mink farm, Barbara? Okay. Well, I had some pictures in there somewhere of Thea and George. Do you remember them at all? Or the mink farm. The reason I know the mink farm is my brother worked at it.
So that would be the Ming Farm on Highway K. The old Donovan.
No, it was, I thought it was just down on 51, but maybe it was on K. This would have been back in, let's see, he would have been, how did I figure that out? He would have been about 18. He was born in 32, 42. Would have been about 48, 49, somewhere
I
in there.
believe. Well, I know it was a poultry farm. I don't know if it was a mink farm prior
Well,
to that.
I know it was mink for sure
Yeah.
because my brother worked at it and mother wouldn't even let him come in the house.
they're
You
also-
have to take your clothes off and go right in the lake.
Smelly mink. There was also a mink farm up on B, out of Boulder Junction.
Okay. This
But I
was,
don't know.
I thought, just
It'd be fun to
south
find out where that was.
of, what's the restaurant down there where the grocery store is?
Oh, Harry's. Harry's
Yes.
Supermarket? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a mink farm there.
There was.
Absolutely.
You can remember that. Okay.
Yeah, that was the Cassine farm. There was also a worm farm there and the cranberry marsh now. We did that in our farming video. It's all documented.
But the Fishers, were they involved in it? You know, I'm
It-
just thinking that they were, but I can't recall.
We'll have to do some more research on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I really don't.
When you went to the dump, do you have any good stories about the dump? Or did Cap Smith ever do some shenanigans at the dump?
I don't even know if he went with us. That sounds something more touristy, and I don't think he would have gone.
Oh, okay,
No,
okay.
we went with aunts and uncles, and maybe.
Yeah.
I don't even know if my dad went. Maybe he did. But he didn't want to leave the place.
Isn't that
Not
something?
even at night.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So if you could tell us a couple of paragraphs about what this place means to you, what would you say now? You were born to come up north. I mean, your family
Yeah.
been here for 2 generations
Yeah.
before you.
Yeah.
You're the 3rd generation.
Yeah. And then the 4th generation, one of them was born here, yeah.
Yep.
I get tears in my eyes when I think about it. And I just feel so awful the way it's shrunk. We had my aunt and uncle that lived here for a while, and they did some of this fixing up. And as I said, that used to be a porch over there, that's part
Yeah.
of the house. And we rented this place one summer, or for 2 weeks. My brother had 4 of his boyfriends come up, and they went fishing, they went swimming, they went sailing, they did all kinds of things. But we had more fun with them, and I mean, they were just big brothers to me. It wasn't somebody I
Yeah.
fell in love with or anything. They were just guys. And then when my aunt and uncle took things over, after my dad passed on, things really changed. A big deal, a big amount.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of that, what do you know about the maps that came out? What history do you have of those? I was thinking my grandfather started it, but I may be wrong. Barbara, what do you?
Well, I think you're right. I think CAP started publishing those.
Okay.
Those maps, those tourist maps?
Yes,
They're
of
great.
the lakes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. When he passed, well, not when he passed on, Grandpa was hospitalized or kept in a senior home down in Chicago for quite a while. And then he was moved to Albuquerque for 2 years. And my dad took over the map thing. And every bit of money he made off of that, which was the advertising in it, because you gave them away free to the different stores that distributed them, he put back in the place here. And he added a bathroom here. He did a few other things. He had all kinds of plans. And then he passed on. So then my cousin and her husband took over, and they kept the money, which, you know, it's a younger couple. Not really, but they felt they needed it. And so the money didn't go back into the place. And as you can see, we've had trouble just keeping it up ourselves. I mean, that place over there needs paint, something horrible, refinishing inside. We haven't been here for 2 years now, and then we were gone for 2 years because of COVID.
Yeah.
So this place is deteriorating. So it's just been very difficult to keep things going.
Right.
The other thing, after we sold to Hutter's, why we missed having the place down there, but it got to the point where we enjoyed walking down to visit with Mrs. Hutter.
Oh, tell us about the
Yeah.
Hunters. Yes.
She was, they were lovely people, really. But because they were German during the war years and so forth, and even afterwards, for couple years, you know, people weren't that nice to them.
Really?
They weren't that friendly. They weren't mean or pull tricks on them, but they just weren't friendly with them. And,
Did they speak with a German accent?
a bit, yeah. Lydia was her name. I can't remember his now. Franz, something like that. Anyway, she was a lovely person. In fact, my daughter remembers walking down to see her and visiting. So you can see how long they lived over there. And there was a lovely trail. One of the pictures over there
Okay.
shows the path that we used to walk over.
So what year did you sell to the Hunters? Do you
I don't know.
So it was before World War II, though.
Oh, just sell the thing. It must have been.
Because you remembered the war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was part of us walking down there. What was I talking at before that? You were asking questions about.
Just what it was, what the Hunters were like,
Oh,
what that
what they
resort
were
was like.
Well, they were just very. And of course, we sold off because, I started to tell you, my aunt and uncle, once he passed on, he had remarried, and there was a large amount of money that he left in debt. for his daughters to take over, and they couldn't do that. So they wanted to sell. So they were the first ones. Now that, of course, is after all of those properties over there were sold off. The first place was sold was the Point, which was where the channel goes
Yes,
from
right
one
at the
lake to the
channel,
other.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And we kids used to love to hike out there and take picnics, and
I bet that was
We
a
were-
perfect picnic spot.
yes, and we were kind of disappointed with Grandpa when he did that, but you know, that was his business and
Mm-hmm.
what he wanted to do. And then he sold off eventually and so forth. And I think Jim Laporte bought one of them, didn't he? Jim Laporte, didn't he own one of those houses over on Start Lake?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. He bought one of those lots and built a house over there. Yeah. So I don't know any of the other folks that bought.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope more local people, but they're probably more.
So, and the football coach, or the former football coach, Chris, did they buy land down here too? Or
I
am
don't-
I on the wrong lake?
I don't know any. I
Down
wouldn't,
that way, okay.
I
down
wouldn't
that
know
way.
any football coaches around here. So my kids didn't go to school here.
Okay.
So that was the first place to sell. And then my sister and her husband had problems and they wanted to sell. So we had to sell another chunk. And then my Uncle Ken and his wife Loopy, did you know them?
I did meet them, yeah.
You did.
Mm-hmm.
You met them. Okay. I understand that you understand then. Okay.
Yeah.
She was his third wife.
Oh.
You
I
know
didn't
that?
No, I did not know that.
The first wife was Jean, and she was up here when I was a kid. I've got pictures of her in there in the sailboat and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And his second wife was somebody he met when he went to, when he got his PhD back in Columbia. They lived out in Colorado for a long time, and then they were divorced, and then he married Loopy. So, and they,
And they were in that little cabin.
yeah, they were in the office. And
That
they-
was the office. That cabin
Oh,
was
yes.
called the office.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
tell us about the office.
Well, Daddy ran it as an office up until when
Gordon did, or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
my dad.
okay.
My dad, Gordon. Yeah.
So he would work there, or?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice.
Well, I said when they were married in '29, they
Yeah.
went up for the little honeymoon to Winnipeg. That was it.
Yeah.
And then came back down, and then they worked in that. Yeah. And yeah, he took care of all the keys and the arrangements, and I don't know. They must have written people, or maybe they sent Western telegrams.
Well,
or
with a
something.
property this large and that many family members, somebody had to take
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh.
take the reins and
Yeah,
say this
because
is.
that was before Hunters bought it, so
Yeah.
yeah. But they were only there the summer, and then they went out. Grandpa, in some way or another, he found my dad a job in Yuma, Arizona, and my parents went out there for the year and worked on a grapefruit farm.
Really, that's interesting. Grapefruit farm.
Yeah, a grapefruit farm in Yuma, Arizona. And anyway, they came back and to the Chicago area, and that's where my brother and I later were born. So
Now, I see you have lots of notes there. Is there something that we haven't covered that you can share with us from your notes?
I've been sort of going through these and so forth. Well, there were the way that house is arranged over there. There were 3 bedrooms like this. The middle bedroom became that anteroom before you go into the big one.
Mm-hmm.
The other room, small room, became the library. Then my grandparents' bedroom was about the size of these 2 rooms together they put on. that's where I was staying for about a week and a half till I finally moved over here after we got it cleaned up enough. And then behind there is a bedroom that has 2 beds and 2 double beds in it with the back door. You have to walk around that to go into the bathroom. But that's where my family frequently lived until we moved over to the office and so forth.
Okay.
So that one we did use a great deal. We always had a tent up out in what Grandpa called Sissy's Circle. That was my circle. It was just a loop that went around that people could drive in to do, well, for the 2 cabins over there and for the rest of it here and so forth. So, and we always had a tent up out in there. And some of us kids were always sleeping out there.
So it was just magical. I mean, you had,
Yeah.
and you brought up sailing every once in a while. So was that a
Oh,
popular
yes.
thing for the family to do?
Yes, my dad and my mom didn't sail very much. My brother and I did.
This is a good lake to sail on because it's
Oh,
long.
Yes,
windy.
it is. And that second summer that I was here, I frequently went out sailing by myself. One time I ended up down at the other end of the lake and the wind had changed and I had trouble working back. Well, the one time the wind came up in some way and I tipped over. I mean, I frequently would sail by myself, which was fine.
Yeah.
And Grandpa, I don't even know was he was here or not, maybe not. Anyway, I tipped over. Alvin was in the bar working.
Kerner.
Alvin Kerner was in the bar working that day. He looks out the window and he says, "Oh my God, Jeanette's gonna be late today," because it was my shift to go to work at 1 o'clock or whatever it was. So he prepared people that Jeanette was gonna be late until he saw a big boat coming along and they towed me home. But I tried not to sail down that far again. But it was just the wind conditions. You can't always get back, and they shift sometimes. You know, the squalls come up and so forth. Did you ever sail? Or do you like
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was fun. We just had a little. Now let me ask you this: when you were working, who were your regulars at Kerner's? Who would come in every day? Did you remember any characters?
my grandfather?
He came.
I think it was, I don't know if it was locals or not, really. I think it was more people traveling through because prior to us, it might have been Mercer, if there was even anything there then, besides a bar.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking bars, but for families to go into.
Right.
Or,
Did you ever work over at the hotel or spend any time at the hotel
No,
part?
I didn't.
Did they have that open as well at the time you were working on the...
Oh, yeah, that's where Clara was working.
Clara was
dining-
in the hotel.
Well, she was in the dining room. She was the hostess.
Okay.
And, took care of the dining room in the evening. I don't know what she did in the daytime, if she had something else to do. But I think they were open at lunchtime. I guess I asked about the maps. I was wondering about that. I wanted to know about the violinist, but I told you they played at the 3030 Lodge.
And at Voss's, right?
And at Voss's for... and it was Phyllis and what was the other one's name? Jerry.
Or
okay,
Geraldine.
Yeah. And we used to have to drive in there to get mail years ago.
You go all the way to Manitowish, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Manitowish Waters didn't get Mr. Daniels till... They didn't have anybody before then, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. Years ago, there was a post office. They called it Rest Lake at the Tower Inn.
Oh, at the tower.
In that old
Okay,
log
yeah.
cabin, but no.
Okay.
But Manitowish was kind of the hub.
Yeah. And I remember that the local people were very upset because Mr. Daniels was brought in from out of town. And they wanted somebody local.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. Okay,
All
let me
right.
see. I know I've got a couple notes here.
A few more of those if you have it open.
Oh, me.
I was not holding the camera
Let me see, where are they?
Battery drain.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's, yeah, I just wrote crazy. I told you about the flowers. That was so amazing.
Yes.
You should have seen
That's a perfect romantic story to put in one of our newsletters.
Isn't it though? I
Yeah.
just love it, and it was so unexpected, so unexpected.
Very nice.
And to think, I mean, he isn't that kind of a guy to do something like that. So it was.
He must have
To
been in
think
love.
that he went to the.
Yeah.
Well, we were married 63 plus years
Wonderful.
before he passed. Oh me, I know I had something else here.
Well, you know, if you think of anything else that you didn't tell us, if you would write it down for us
Okay.
and send it to us, that'd
Well,
be really great.
I don't know whether. Do you want me to send you the khaki book itself, or should I send it to? Yeah, I will. I can trust you people to send it back to me.
Sure.
The photograph
Yeah.
of it. Okay. Oh, okay. Where is it? I had something else. That what I told you all about? That one I told you about? Oh, this is one I can tell you about, but I'm not sure that. Maybe we shouldn't record it. My grandfather was illegal sometimes, but did you know he was the oh, what do you call it? Gosh darn it!
Constable?
Yeah, he was
Justice
the
of the peace.
the peace thing. What do you call him? Justice of the peace, because he married people in the big living room in front of the fireplace frequently.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is something else. I laugh about it, and I'm sure you will too. But this is just like my grandfather, though. He was a great fisherman. Although muskie is about the worst fish you can possibly eat, I think. He would cast out right here in front of the house here when we lived over there. And he had a lure on it and so forth. And then he would pull the line after he did that, pull it all the way up to the house, through the door, sit and play bridge, and had the pole on the floor next to him. And then if it was jerked just a little bit, the hand went down. You know, you don't play cards when the fish is, And then he would get up and do his illegal fishing, if he even caught anything. I think the jiggles didn't always work, but maybe once in a while they did. But Grandpa was great at doing that.
That's a great story.
Isn't he a rascal?
Yeah.
Now, you can put that on there. I don't care.
I think that's a great story. Well, thank you, Jeanette. It was wonderful listening.